Our closing keynote speaker is someone who lives at the intersection of strategy, innovation, and bold thinking. Fenton Jagdeo is an award-winning speaker, strategy, and innovation consultant, entrepreneur, and civic leader. He advises Fortune 500 companies, governments, and startups around the world on how to think about their innovation efforts, ensuring they remain competitive for the future. He is a professor of innovation and strategy development at OCAD University and sits on several multi-billion-dollar boards within education and heavy industry. Fenton is known for helping organizations see what's coming and act before it arrives. Today, he will help us connect the dots from everything we've explored and push us to imagine what's truly possible for our industry. Please welcome the stage Fenton Jagdeo.
I want us to look around the room. Come on, look around the room. Today, we are in the presence of some of the best suppliers in the entire country, possibly in the entire continent, as well as generational businesses that have built their value off of hard work, earned trust, and being a strong supporter of your suppliers as well as your customers. And one of the things that both suppliers as well as you, the distributors, have in common is that earned trust. It's been a crucial element of how your businesses have grown today. You know what else you share in common? The idea that you are standing on a burning platform. And we're going to get to this photo in a second. But despite all of this strength, you are all standing on a burning platform. A platform where the rules are constantly changing every single day because the world is changing every single day. From politics to how our customers view sustainability to the climate crisis right before our eyes, all the way down to how we think about innovation. The world that we know it today is shifting. And it's important that we as individuals and as business leaders, it's important that we catch up. And these forces are not politely knocking on our doors. These forces are kicking down the door and trying to interact with how we do business today. But today isn't about fear. Today is about clarity. This entire summit has been about clarity. And this entire summit has also been about a concept. And this concept is that survival is not a gift. Survival is ultimately going to be a decision. And over the conversation that we are going to have, hopefully no longer than 1 hour, we're going to talk about how we make decisions to ensure that the things that helped us build our legacy, the systems that got us to where we are today, can modernize so that we can survive and continue to thrive for tomorrow and for the next 100 years. My name is Fenton Jagdeo. I'm an innovation consultant and a strategist at the intersection of technology, strategy, and the future. I'm an exited entrepreneur. I sold my first company to a large North American conglomerate called Estee Lauder. And I've been doing this work for almost 10 years, thinking about innovation in verticals much like yours, but also in environments that can be incredibly hostile. And I've also been published and featured in some great articles that my mother is very proud of. And when I have these conversations with audiences like you all today, I generally start with the story of a company called Nokia. Some of you might be old enough to know Nokia, I hope. Now, in the early 2000s, Nokia was crushing it. They were on fire. At the time, they had 40% of their market until one day, they didn't. And that's when Stephen Elop, now I was told the laser doesn't work, so I'll just point to Stephen on the screen. But that's when Stephen Elop wrote his memo, The Burning Platform. And he was the CEO at the time, and what he wrote in his memo changed business forever. He said that the situation that Nokia faced was like being on an oil rig that was completely on fire. Has anybody ever been on an oil rig that's on fire? I certainly haven't. But I imagine that when you are on an oil rig that's on fire, you are sort of faced with two decisions. To make a bold decision to survive, or to burn alive. And Nokia was burning. Apple, this company out of California, was taking their market share from the premium consumers. You had Android on the opposite end also stealing their market share. And there was an account at the company that effectively said that it took Chinese manufacturers just as long to make products as it did for Nokia to put together a PowerPoint presentation. And for all of these reasons, the company was on fire, forced to make a decision. And we know exactly what happened. Nokia went into irrelevancy. They lost their market share and they lost mind share. They clung to the ideas that gave them their legacy, despite the fact that there were systems and ideas that could potentially secure their future, and they chose to ignore it. And I love this quote from the CEO: "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." And maybe that's the issue. They didn't do anything. Companies much like yours and much like Nokia, you were all standing on a burning platform with the decision to do something bold or to do nothing at all. Now, many companies, they say, okay, if we're going to survive for the future, we need to do this thing called innovation, right? This magical word about thinking about the future. We're all familiar with this term, innovation. And I'm not talking about the sticky notes or sitting in a conference room coming up with ideas and hoping that they stick. The idea that I'm talking about is a conscious decision to shift the systems that have built our success today to new systems. And in particular, if you're smart about it, you start to think about this thing called business model innovation. And I want to define what business model and innovation combined is for you all today. If you are a business that is selling something to somebody, you have a business model. And the way that we define what a business model is the capture, the adaptation, and the delivery of value to our stakeholders. And for us in the room, our stakeholders are our customers. If you sell something, you have a business model. Congratulations. But what is innovation? The way that we define innovation is the introduction of a new-to-company business model element. That could be a new venture or a new idea. But the thing remains the same. You are still delivering value to your customers. Now, note the specific here. The idea does not have to be novel. The idea does not have to be particularly new to the world. But the idea should be new to your company or new to your industry. That's how we are defining business model innovation. Now, 10 years ago, I used to work for a very large management consultancy called Monitor Deloitte. You may have heard of Deloitte. They're a very small accounting firm. And within Deloitte, we had the first innovation consultancy called Doblin, which actually started in Chicago many, many, many years ago. And when we thought about innovation, we always looked at innovation from the perspective of ambition. There are some organizations here today who are incredibly conservative and scared of doing new things. And if that's you, that's okay. There are also companies that are incredibly liberal and want to go out and try new things and aren't afraid to fail. If that is you, that is also okay. But when we think about business model innovation, we always think about it from the lens of ambition. And we developed this tool called the ambition matrix to try and plot where business model innovation has to go. And I'll walk you through some of that today. On the x-axis, we have products and assets. And on the y-axis, we have markets and customers. And our belief is that for you to create newness, to create new ventures, you can do that by either entering into new markets, developing new customers, or, as some of us have talked about today, creating new products and creating new assets. This is the way that we believe we drive innovation. And based on where we sit across this continuum is where our ambition is. So for example, if we're coming up with existing products that target our existing markets, we look at that as core innovation. And I'll be completely honest with you, that innovation sucks. It's not new. For example, maybe you take artificial intelligence and you incorporate it into the way that you cross-sell your customers. Wow, artificial intelligence, it must be innovative. The problem is that we're still delivering value to our customers the same way that we already have. It's just becoming more efficient. And efficiency optimization, that is not innovation. That's just doing the same thing better. But as we move away from the core and we get to adjacent, we start to see some really exciting ideas. Maybe we want to enter into a new market or a new customer, or we want to deliver a whole new product. Say, I don't know, maybe a certification or a hygiene audit that you can sell with your products to ensure that your customers, your end users, the hotels, the schools are compliant. That's a new upsell. That is a new idea. And that's expanding from an existing business model to creating new to company ideas. This is where we start to talk about business model innovation. This stuff here is where the magic is. And of course, if you're a crazy person like me, then you want to be transformational. You want to do things no one has ever seen before. You want to enter into markets and customers that you've never tapped into and build the products and assets that don't exist yet. Here's an example, maybe a reverse bidding system where your clients can bid on certain products that exist in the market and maybe it sits on the blockchain. That's something that we might consider transformational levels of innovation. Now, the key to this here is as we think about building new ventures and new ideas, we want to do our best to sit within adjacent and within transformational. Now, this map is good, but Fenton, so what? Here's what we found. We found that the businesses that had a budget for innovation, they divided their budget based on the 70-20-10 ratio. 70% of that budget was dedicated to core innovation. 20% of their budget adjacent, and 10% to transformational. And when we did the research to understand where the value was coming from, we saw something incredibly interesting. We saw that the return on invested capital was actually the inverse. So what that means is that 90% of a strong return on invested capital was coming from ideas that were adjacent and transformational. Ideas where you were starting to target new customers, new markets, thinking about new assets and new products. Which means for us, as we start to think about our own innovation journey, it's important that we deploy capital to ideas that may make us a little bit uncomfortable, but more importantly, will help us get into new markets and new products. Thankfully, for distributors in the room, and I'm sure this might be the same for suppliers, business model innovation is a top priority. I've been privy to some incredible research that was done by an organization called MDM. We may all be familiar with MDM, Modern Distribution Management. They're a strategic agency that does research to think about the future of your verticals. And doing this research, here is what they found, which I think is incredibly important to you. 76% of the distribution companies that they had interviews with and surveyed believed that business model innovation was going to be a top priority over the next 5 years. So if you belong to that category, good job, because you are in very, very good company. And 63% of those companies believe that it will continue to be a force to reckon with. It would continue to be important in today's environment, which I thought is very interesting. Have we heard of the acronym, and maybe the acronym isn't the same in different languages, but have we heard of VUCA? VUCA? Okay, VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain. What's the next one? Complex. And the last one? Ambiguous. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that's our world. So for those who went to business school tells you that when your world is volatile, you stop spending money. You batten down the hatches. You preserve what you have. But this is incredible to see, because when the going gets tough, businesses and organizations much like yours and your ecosystem, you continue to invest, and you continue to believe that business model innovation actually matters. And the investment dollars that your peers are putting into this ecosystem is rising also. And we believe that that distribution investment is rising and going to be roughly 73% over time. So what this means is that even though the world is volatile, uncertain, complex, and incredibly ambiguous, your peers are still trying to build new things, despite what every single piece of information or dogma tells us. My ask for you all today is to think about how you can innovate within your organizations. But of course, it would be incredibly irresponsible if I just said it's time to innovate. We need to develop some sort of model or framework to start to think about it. And I call this framework the business model innovation hierarchy of needs. We had a triangle earlier in our presentation yesterday morning, and we end with another triangle. That's an inside joke for everybody who was here yesterday. The business model innovation hierarchy of needs starts with themes, then goes into how we choose to win, the capabilities that we need to succeed in the market, and of course, action. Because at least in North America, we have a saying, talk is cheap and execution sets us apart. And over the last 2 days, Fred, we've been talking about a bunch of amazing themes, don't you think? We've talked about a ton of very important themes that are going to impact the way that our ecosystem and industry operates, not just for tomorrow, but for the next several years. We talked about brand, going from a commodity to our commitment. And if you're a distributor or a supplier, you know this too well. Your brand has always been about efficiency. Did I get my product on time? Is my product not damaged? And can I rely on them to do it again? That has always been your brand, reliability. But here's the challenge. As I'm sure you all know, the world is changing. And in today's landscape, your brand is no longer just what you do, it's what you stand for. And it may not be about building new ideas or products, but it's certainly about the values your business cares about. Because your customers are asking, are my partners transparent? Are they inclusive? Do they have good practices? Can I be seen with them at a party? Maybe a party happening later today. This is all part of your brand, and this is what it's going to stand for. So what does your brand stand for? There's a company in North America called Patagonia. Maybe some of you have heard of it, maybe some of you have not. But they have built a brand around environmentalism. That is what they're known for. And I know there are some people in the crowd that say, well, Fenton, it's incredibly easy for a brand like Patagonia to build a brand. They sell to consumers. But it would be inappropriate or a myth to think that as a B2B business, or even a B2B2B business, that your brand cannot be a form of competitive advantage. We don't live in a world any longer where your customers are buying from you. We are living in a world where your customers are also buying into you. So your brand is a signal. It is not a stamp, it is a signal. And that signal should stand for something. My opinion is that the strongest distribution companies of the future will no longer rely on product as their brand. They will compete on narratives, you will compete on values, and you will compete on alignment. This is very critical. We talked about business succession. Fred doesn't look it, but he's 75 years old. He's been running the business for such a long time. In this room, we have generations of business leaders who have been keeping the ecosystem of hygiene and supplier chains focused. And the decisions that you made, your forefathers and foremothers made, the legacy that was built have brought you to where you are today. But as we know, the world is changing. The world is becoming modern. Technology is impacting the way that we do everything. And as family businesses thinking about the future, you're probably caught somewhere in the middle, thinking about tradition and what got us to where we are today, and thinking about modernity and how we win for the future. There's a bit of a tug of war, and we're uncertain as to what direction we want to go in. So the question begs, what will you choose? Do we know this company? This is Gucci. Someone's got some Gucci shoes in the room today. I think Leonardo's got some Gucci shoes on. So if you want to take a look at what Gucci is, you take a look. But as we know, Gucci is a heritage brand. Started as a family business, and they had a choice. They could do the same thing that they've done over and over and over again, or they could modernize. They can bring in new social influence, new forms of creativity, start to think about how they can prove authenticity on the blockchain, or using artificial intelligence and AR to show you if you look really good in one of their suits. And what you'll notice, folks, is today I'm going to share examples that are completely outside of your ecosystem because it is important that you know about the world around you. But what Gucci did is that they decided to be innovative on their own terms. And what I'm not asking you to do today, folks, and what I don't think the summit has been asking you to do is to become like Silicon Valley. But instead, what we're asking you to do is to build innovation in your own way, rooted in what you know to be true. That's just not going to change. Your long-term relationships, your community connections, and your values. We talked about customers. We talked about international expansion. We talked about how difficult it might be to create standards that make multinational companies want to work with us. And for some of us, maybe when we think about international expansion, the conversation sort of looks like this. A friend of a friend sends you a WhatsApp message, says they have a friend who's looking to get some products. You scramble away to try and figure it out, and eventually you make it work. And then you high-five your team. We did it. We did it. The problem is that making it work is not strategic. Making it work is serendipity. And if we want to win in the international markets, we need to grow by design and not by default. The idea that ESG and regulations are only within one border, it's fallacious. They follow us everywhere. So how are we thinking about those standards? We talked earlier today about standardized products wherever we are. Companies like the Marriott and McDonald's, absolutely we want the same kind of tissue paper, doesn't matter where their store is. So how do we start to build those processes into the way that we operate? Do we have any music listeners or lovers in the room? Anybody have Spotify? Right? Spotify is great because Spotify gives us the ability to listen to music around the world, and I'm sure there's a playlist somewhere that's got some of the best Brazilian pop music that the country has to offer. But Spotify is also a fantastic example of a global company with global resources thinking intimately and thinking locally, which, thankfully, is how the majority of the networks in this room have built their purpose and their success. So how do you think about local headquarters, but bringing global branding to the situation? These stories are so critical to how you drive success in your local market. Because ultimately, your competitors, your global customers, aren't impressed by potential. They are impressed and are loyal to partners and companies who deliver predictability. And predictability is so important to our organizations and how we win. I see a lot of people taking photos. It means I'm definitely doing a good job, so I appreciate the sentiment. We talked about sustainability. A couple of years ago, no one would have ever thought about sustainability. It was maybe a small tab on your website. Maybe you gave it to an operations manager to think about when they had time. But as we know today, these 100-year storms are happening every single year. And as my dear friend Jose said earlier today, thinking about sustainability is not thinking about being woke. It's doing what's right for the planet that ultimately helps our businesses. Sustainability is now the only bottom line that matters. We talked about the triple bottom line several years ago. It's the only thing that matters today. And my belief system, and I'm happy to argue with you later on this, but my belief system is that if your company isn't taking sustainability seriously, you are already falling behind. Those that are thinking about sustainability are ultimately going to be creating new business models. We hear about companies all the time taking waste and turning that into a revenue-generating opportunity that aligns so well with their customers. Interface, for example. Interface is a company that sells tiles. They're one of the largest tile suppliers in the entire world. And by 2040, Interface has made a commitment to be completely carbon neutral. And that philosophy, that desire, has forced them to think about their value chain and how they deliver value critically, unlocking new grants from the government, thinking about innovation in a way that plays with their waste, and ultimately delivering that value back to their customers. Sustainability is no longer a cost to manage, my friends. Sustainability is an engine for growth, and we heard about that today. The future does not belong to those who want to be the cheapest provider, which sometimes means ignoring sustainability. The future belongs to the providers who are the most principled one. And finally, we talked about supply chain reinvention. How was COVID for us? Good? Rough? Bad? Good? Okay. Some good. Surprisingly good. Surprisingly good. Maybe that's not the same story for everyone here and every vertical. But if COVID was surprisingly good for you, it still begs the question, can we afford another COVID-19? Or can we afford another scenario where the world is caught flat-footed and doesn't know where to go? As distributors and as suppliers, we've done our best to build our legacy based on optimizing around cost and around efficiency, getting it done right, getting it done on time, and ensuring that what we do can be measured to the second. But I think what we've also recognized is that this idea and this concept of efficiency might not be the best thing for us to focus on because it's fragile. And for the engineers in the room, we know that the most efficient system, when it breaks down, it has the worst consequences on our business. I think we've also recognized that resiliency in it of itself is powerful. After COVID-19 or any of these epidemics impacting us, you're probably asking yourself, well, how do we think about nearshoring? How do we think about diversifying our supplier network? How do we think about building, and maybe you haven't thought about this before, but how do we think about building redundancy into our supply chain network? We all know the big blue monster. Well, at least that's what we call them in Canada. But we're all familiar with Walmart. Walmart 2 years ago saw this coming. And they went from having a supply chain to supply webs, thinking about local partnerships that they could take advantage of, finding ways to build in redundancy, and ultimately scathing the COVID-19 pandemic. I think the future of supply chain is not about who is the cheapest. It's ultimately going to be about who the smartest person is going to be. And what that means for your organizations today is that your organization needs to be traceable, it needs to be predictable, transparent, and ultimately resilient. These themes, these conversations that we've been having over the last 2 days, they are so important to the future of the industry. And because of these themes, your peers, whether they're in the same vertical as you or in another vertical, they're finding ways to innovate these business models, to extract the most value from it. So why don't we take a look at how some of your peers are doing it? That might be a very helpful next step. Distributors are pursuing new and different types of business models, okay? And there's a bunch of numbers and circles on the page, so what I'll do is I'll give you a quick legend. Anything that's a gray circle represents where distributors are thinking about today. Anything in a blue circle represents the number of distributors who will be thinking about this idea or this concept into the next 5 years. And that percentage point in the left-hand corner represents what that increase is. And some of these, I'm sure, come as to no surprise. Artificial intelligence, AI, and data analytics is an area in which your peers are deriving value from. Anybody use ChatGPT in the room? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. The advent of ChatGPT, Perplexity, and AI tools is making it easier for us to build incredible workflows. And what we noticed in this research is that organizations that are incorporating AI and data analytics 4 times more likely to drive a return from their innovative offerings, which is incredible. Another one that I thought was quite interesting, the idea of IoT and connected devices. Imagine working with your end consumer and knowing exactly when you need to order new products for them because that product on the shelf has depleted. Currently, this market is roughly about $41 billion, and by 2030, it's going to balloon to $137 billion. The reason for that? It's getting cheaper. It's getting cheaper to bring this technology and these tools into our businesses. So if you're not thinking about IoT, make sure you get ahead of where the future is going. Marketplaces. We know that some of our companies and peers are developing marketplaces. Now, marketplaces is an interesting one. A small percentage of companies are thinking about marketplaces, but it's got a 28% growth rate over the next 5 years. Amazon, for example, has absolutely killed it in this environment. Currently, Amazon Business is pushing roughly $80 billion worth of gross merchandise volume. And people are thinking about what their marketplaces look like today. And finally, one other one that I want to call out, which I think is important, is the idea of wholesale and digital retail. Now, a big space, a ton of peers are thinking about this space, but also implementing new ventures here. I would caution you to say that this is an area that you might want to go in. E-commerce is becoming incredibly saturated. And unless you're willing to win on user experience, personalization, and that customer experience, then it might be a very difficult ecosystem to try and do your first innovative adventure. Now, these 4 ideas, by the way, are not suggestions on where you need to go, but some examples on how your peers in different verticals are thinking about their innovation journey. I want to look at some case studies and paint a picture for you as to how specific companies are thinking about business model innovation to give you some inspiration. Have you heard of QXO? I love this story about QXO. It's one of my favorite stories ever. QXO is a technology services and professional service company. They're based out of the US. And last month, they finalized the acquisition of an $11 billion company called Beacon Roofing Supplies. Beacon Roofing Supplies was the largest publicly traded roofing and building supplies company in America. The company was founded in, I think, 1929. Now, QXO, after buying this company, is now going to be taking artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, pumping the business with these new technologies to find ways to drive new value for customers. And this is a fantastic example in which mergers and acquisitions for companies like QXO that don't sell physical products, examples like QXO on how they're completely changing the world and the ecosystem on how they compete. The big shift here is that they're moving from traditional distribution operations to AI-first data decision models. And that's going to be so critical as we think about the future. And my guess is that this PE style of bringing in resources and finding new ways to deliver value is going to continue for a very long time. The next one is iMotion, Motion Industries. Motion Industries is a spin-off of a company called Genuine Parts Company. And what they've built is a predictive maintenance as a subscription service. Now, what that means is they have this cloud-based platform where they've integrated IoT into their customers, and they know exactly when they need new parts. It measures everything from vibrations to the depreciation of the parts itself, all the way down to how many minutes the part has been on. And based on all of that information, they're able to predict when they have to now go and buy a new part. And it's done with no human intervention. So what this company has done is they said, not only will we sell you the parts that you need for whatever machine you have going, whatever MRO you're looking for, we're also going to tell you when you need to buy it, finding new ways to deliver value to their customers through the power of professional services. My belief is that you're going to go from just distributing products that your customers need to figuring out how you build an ecosystem of different services that you can sell with those products that will be value added to your customers. And that idea of doing a subscription-based service is going to be part of what your future looks like. And finally, Zorro. Have we heard of Zorro before? Zorro is a fantastic example of marketplaces. Zorro is a spin-off from a company called Grainger. They're a US-based company that is in the business of MRO services. And what they thought was, look, we work with these massive accounts that are spending multiple millions of dollars with us all the time. And we always promise white glove service. But what about the rest of the market? What about everybody else who doesn't have the ability to spend billions of dollars with us? So instead of trying to cater to those audiences with the same old traditional model, they decided to build out a B2B marketplace where they can sell products from multiple suppliers in one, and I think we called this something earlier, one-stop shop. This idea, this new venture, this new business model innovation started in 2011. And since then, the company has made almost $1 billion in sales based on this one venture and one idea. So, what happens if we in this room start to take the forces that shape our world seriously? We talked about some of those themes earlier, brand, sustainability, where the world is going, all these forces. And what if we decided to borrow some courage from the examples that we saw earlier and verticals that are close to yours? What might be possible for us? I took about 2 hours several days ago to come up with some interesting ideas that some of you may find scary, some of you may find impossible, or some of you might be inspired by. By no means are these examples that you should go out and build, but I just want to show you the power of how we think about this. What if we created a vendor tokenized loyalty exchange? What does this look like? I'll explain it to you. Imagine building an exchange that sits on the blockchain, and effectively you are rewarding your customers for things like good behavior, paying your invoices on time, buying new products. And each time they exhibit a new behavior that you like, you give them one of these blockchain tokens. And these tokens can then be used for discounts or used to buy new products or to try new things. You're adding value to your customers by offering a really great way to show a premium experience. You're offering them really great gamified discounts. And at the same time, you're getting something from that too. You're encouraging the right behaviors that you want to ensure that you're delivering value to your customers. And does this sound crazy? Maybe. But there are already signals in the market of companies doing that. Some of you may not know this, but Starbucks tried doing this. Now, they failed successfully. It didn't work out, but it's not to say that companies like yours in the room can't try something like this. And Salesforce, as an example, one of the biggest technology companies in the world, they're now starting to think about tokenized incentives for their clients. Maybe this is something that you want to build. I don't know. Here's another one. An AI concierge for procurement. Imagine having an AI that embeds with your customers and it learns everything about their usage patterns, how fast they use products, how slow they use products. And what this AI does is it takes away all human intervention. When your customer needs a new product or needs to, upgrade their janitorial supply, the AI makes the purchase already. And it has an added benefit of being integrated into the supply chain of the business so that the AI can negotiate with other types of vendors to help them out. What that means for us in the room is that we can optimize our costs, and what it means for our customers is we can think about new opportunities to deliver value to them in ways that we may not have considered previously. And finally, I call this one the circular distribution loop. And what this is becoming a reverse logistics leader. Maybe some of your clients aren't using a particular product any longer. Maybe they've closed their business down. Maybe they ordered too much of a specific idea or a specific product. You can serve as a reverse leader. That means buying the product back from them or taking the product back from them, refurbishing it, repackaging it, and selling it to another client where it makes sense. This is you tapping into the idea that sustainability is here to stay and also adding new value to your customers. And we're starting to see signals like this happen. The European Union is already advocating for a system like this. And I know that IKEA doesn't operate here in Brazil, but if you ever buy furniture from this company, if you don't like it, you can always take it back to one of their hubs. They'll repackage it and sell it at a discount to someone else. Crazy ideas? No? I hope not. So, of course, we've got our themes. We know where the world is going. We know what capabilities our peers are thinking about to drive success. What are some of the levers that we need to pull as entities to make this happen? Let's talk about capabilities. This is one of my favorite sayings. I don't know where I heard it, so I think I made it up myself. Strategy whispers, culture speaks, but capabilities shout. There's a common misconception that in order for you to drive innovation, you need to have an innovative culture. Well, as one of my mentors likes to say, if culture is the first thing that comes to mind, you should lie down until that idea goes away from you. You can't build a culture unless you have the capabilities in place. Here are what your peers are doing. To reach business model ambitions, your peers are starting to think about the things they need within their enterprise. And this is what the research from MDM shows us. 66% of your peers think that they need to have external resources to help them think about the future. Think consultants. Think McKinsey & Company. Maybe not as expensive as McKinsey & Company. But we're starting to see this happen in the ecosystem. It's okay not to know. It's okay to go and seek help from organizations that have done this before or are doing it better. And we see so many of examples of this in nature. There's a company out in the US called Gulf Coast Papers. I don't know if they're a part of Network. If they're not, maybe that's an email that has to be sent. Gulf Coast did some work with a sales analytics agency to build their data analytics bench. Gulf Coast didn't have the resources, but they brought in the consultants to make it happen. So do not be afraid to bring in external resources to make innovation come to reality. Sourcing new technology. How can we be in the business of using AI, ML, blockchain? Pick your favorite acronym. How can we be in that business if we're not procuring it? In order for us to build innovation into our businesses, we have to go after the technology. We have to be willing to spend the money on the technology. Essity is a Stockholm-based supplier of hygiene products, and they recently just procured a great IoT system. I think they call it the IoT brick. And what it does is it integrates with their clients and knows when it's time to order new janitorial supplies, just as an example. So, how do we think about that technology? 51% of your peers are thinking about what it's like to build a team or an executive. Do your companies have chief financial officers? Do they have chief operating officers? Some of you may even be the presidents of your organization. But when there is a title and a team that is allocated to innovation, you start to take it seriously. You bring in the right leaders who can make the vision come true. You build the short-term incentives to inspire people, and you build out long-term incentives so they stick around. If innovation is to happen in your organization, you have to treat this like any other department. And that means bring in the right leadership to make it happen. Companies do this all the time. The chief growth officer, the chief innovation officer, we're seeing companies in your world bring in this talent to drive this focus. 51% of your peers are thinking about allocated funding. How can we innovate if there's no money tied to innovation? And that might be a hard thing for us to grapple with, but in order for us to drive innovation, there has to be a budget. Hopefully it's not $2, but it doesn't have to be $20 million. It needs to be sizable enough so that an organization can go and experiment without any recourse, without any issues. Because ultimately, if there's no money tied to something, then there's no accountability, right? We see this happening in our departments all the time. It's no different within the world of innovation. I want to talk about a couple of other ones on this slide, but I think you get the picture. There are so many levers that we need to be pulling within our company to drive that innovation agenda. Mergers and acquisition. We talked earlier today about a fund that Impacts has, dedicated to potentially buying businesses for leaders who may want to transition their business away from the family. I think it's a brilliant idea. How can we build something similar like that to maybe buy the right resources that we need, to work with the right startups who already have the technology? Then we can include that technology into the businesses that we have today. Maybe it also means buying other companies. But M&A can be a massive source of value for driving innovation and building those capabilities within your organization. There's one at the bottom, in the far left-hand corner, and it's sensing and it's scanning. And according to your peers, it's one of the least important capabilities that you need. And I found this to be incredibly interesting. Because how can you think about the future if you have no idea what the future might hold? If you're not sitting down and asking, well, what are the themes that are impacting our business? What are the future trends that might have an impact on the way that we operate? I found this to be incredibly interesting, and we're going to come back to this element in a second because I want to talk about this a bit more. For business model innovation, for business model innovators in your distribution ecosystem, if there's anything you take away from me today, it's that practice makes profit. And what does that mean? From the research that MDM did, we found out that distributors with 5 business model innovation attempts were 3 times more likely to generate 10% of their overall revenue from those ideas. Now, notice that I use the word attempt. It doesn't mean that you were successful. And quite frankly, your first attempt at innovation is probably going to suck. But that's okay. Because innovation is an iterative process. You have to keep trying and learning from each attempt before you can get somewhere tangible. And this is the expectation that we need to put on ourselves. So if you want innovation and business model of innovation to be at the beginning of how you drive the future, you have to at least try. When was it ever uncool to try? I don't know. Here's what else we found. We found that there were some particular behaviors that the best innovators in your peer spaces do that drive the innovation agenda so much more effectively. Companies who are 2 times more likely to innovate, they reported allocating specific funding to business model innovation. That means building out a budget for innovation, leaving that budget, and letting the teams responsible for driving innovation play with that budget, whether they failed or whether they succeeded. Carving out some dollars to try and make these attempts possible. Those that were driving revenue or value from their business model innovations were 2.5 times more likely to use partnerships. Yesterday we talked about the idea that nobody is independent. We are all somewhat dependent on each other, and we call this idea codependency. So who are the partners that might be willing to work with us as we build out our innovation agenda? These could be suppliers, technology enablers, maybe consultants who can help us along that journey. Companies that were successful here were 3 times more likely to report having a dedicated executive to innovation. Again, you need to treat this practice not as a side of desk activity, but as an actual role in a company that's driving success. If nobody is managing it, then you will not succeed. Imagine not having a CFO of a business. That would be the worst thing ever. Not a single person dedicated to numbers. It's the same thing with innovation. And finally, and this is where I have the problem with the earlier slide, because what we found was that companies that scanned and thought about the future, did trend forecasting, sat there and thought about the trends that would impact their business, they were 4 times more likely to succeed. What that means is sitting around a table, being at summits like the one that we're at today, and talking to your peers. What trends are impacting your bottom line? What are the ideas that you believe your customers are looking for in the future? I mean, through the supply chain conversation, we saw that great slide walking through what customer satisfaction may look like and what your customers are looking for. It's having these conversations and sensing and scanning for the future that ultimately will help you determine where innovation has to happen for your businesses. So how do we start, right? Because as I said earlier, talk is cheap and execution sets us apart. Yapping without action, it doesn't work. Here's how we start. We take some actions. The first thing is that systems breed success. Within your organizations, if innovation is something that you care about, if the agenda of innovation is something that matters, then you need to build the systems, right? Culture, forget about it for a second. If you build a system where people are allowed to try things and they're allowed to fail, culture will come. If you build the systems where there are processes and stage gates, so you're managing that innovation fund better, you will be more successful. So start to build the systems that you need to drive the innovation agenda. Second, practice makes profits. Do not be afraid to fail. Some of the best innovators in the entire world have failed multiple times. Failing is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of learning. And every single attempt that you make to try and build something new is an attempt to learn something different about how you think about things and how you do things. I would encourage you all to go look up this concept called the lean startup, which talks about building new ideas in a cost-effective manner, effectively arguing that you can start small iterate, and slowly add budget to things. You don't have to spend 20 million all in one go. You can do things iteratively. And there are ways to manage what that looks like. Top of org versus side of desk. If you care about driving business model innovation, there has to be somebody in charge of it. Not like sustainability 5 years ago, where it was side of desk, where only a few people cared. This has to happen today. So go hire your chief innovation officer, your manager of innovation. Give them responsibility and give them the incentive to go out and try new things. If nobody is doing the work will not get done. It's as simple as that. See the future first. And that's where these summits and conversations are so critical. Whether you're having conversations with your peers, your suppliers, or doing scenario planning within your own organizations, you should have an idea as to what the future may look like. And based on those futures, determine what has to happen today for you to be successful in the world of innovation. So if you're not doing any of those scenario planning, you should start doing that today. And I'm happy to talk about how we do that for the future and how you make that possible. And finally, for Christ's sake, get out of the building. Talk to your customers. We made an assumption earlier today in our conversation that the people in this room understand customers better than anyone else. And I believe that to be true. But in order for you to continue understanding your customer, you need to go and speak to them, have conversations, interview them. Potentially, that might mean building a council of your favorite customers to constantly give you feedback. It means sitting down for a coffee or a beer and asking, how can we make the world a better place for you? Speak to your customers. Understand their desires. We have this common framework in the world of innovation called the balanced breakthrough. And whenever you come up with a new innovative idea, it has to do three things. It has to be feasible, which means you have to have the ability to make it happen. It has to be viable, i.e., there needs to be some form of economic value generated. And the third most important one is it has to be desirable. Why would you make something if nobody wants it? Get out of the building, have conversations with your customers, and find out what makes them tick. Remember this? It doesn't matter if you are in distribution, if you are a supply chain partner, if you are an organization that isn't in your world, you are standing on a burning platform. And the fire around you may not be actual fire, but it's changing trends. It's politics, it's tariffs, it's thinking about what the customer wants, it's our value systems and how that impacts our business. And as leaders in this room, we have two options. We can either succumb to the forces that are in our way, or we can start to make bold decisions that set us up forever. We have businesses that have been around for generations in this room. Let's ensure that you continue to exist for generations after. My personal belief is that though you can win in so many different ways, the best way is through the use of business model innovation, the creation of something new that adds value and captures value for your customers. And over the last 2 days, we've talked about some incredible themes that will give you some insight as to where you start, from what your brand means to business succession, to your customer and why your customer is so central to winning, sustainability and supply chain reinvention. We've taken a look at how some of your peers are thinking about business model innovation, from data analytics and artificial intelligence all the way down to IoT and connected devices. And the one thing I'd like to leave with you all today is that the possibilities for winning through business model innovation, it's endless. The question we have to ask ourselves, however, is, are we ready to embrace it? And more importantly, are we ready to execute? So this summit, it's not about fear. It's about clarity. And it's about recognizing that the systems and ideas that built our legacy aren't going to be the same systems that will ensure our future. And my belief system is that business model innovation, building newness that drives value for your customers, this is truly what's going to ensure that you survive for the next 100 years. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to take questions. Questions? Do you want to do questions? And feel free to connect with me on WhatsApp or LinkedIn or in person. I'll be here for a little bit. And I'm very happy to take questions. Tell me your deepest, darkest secrets.
Okay.
I also know that I'm standing in between you and the party, so.
So Fenton, first of all, thank you for the lecture. We appreciate having you here. And I want to ask a question because you are in a very special position because you were with us for 2 days, right?
2 days, sitting in the corner.
Sitting in the corner, paying close attention, right?
Yes.
And what do you see in terms of what traits you see from our group or from our market or from our organization that puts in the right track to innovate or to grow or to face the future challenge that you just displayed here in your speech?
It's a great question. Thank you for it. First and foremost, you invited your suppliers here today. And to the suppliers, thank you so much for coming and engaging with us. It's been a pleasure to have you here as the audience member. But that in itself is so crucial, right? What you're doing as an organization is you're taking a look at your entire value chain and saying, where can we add value? It's not just about our customers, but it's about our stakeholders overall. So ensuring that you think about everyone across your delivery of value is going to be critical. You start to think about new ideas, new ventures that impact every single stakeholder across that. So I thought that was quite novel and quite interesting. The second thing, and this is, I think, critical to the value proposition of impacts or networks or ALLIA, it's having that network. The idea that you can come together as peers and partners who don't compete against each other and have your best interest at mind, that in and of itself is an innovation. And it's doing quite well for delivering value to your customers. So we talked about sensing and scanning, and we talked about partnerships, and we talked about technology. All of those conversations can be facilitated because of your network partnerships, whether it's network or impacts or ALLIA. That, I think, is important. And also having this summit here today to have really difficult conversations on the themes that are impacting us. I mean, I heard discussions today on, debating whether or not we need to build our own products. To the suppliers in the room, they don't want to build their own products, okay? It's not on the table. But the fact that we're having these very uncomfortable discussions is what also helps kickstart the conversation. So don't be afraid to have discussions. I know some people in the room, Jose doesn't want to be political, but let's talk about the politics. Let's engage in it and see where it takes us. So I hope that answers your question.
One more. Jose, you can ask your question, Jose.
There was another question?
Do I need to get a headset? Okay.
So, thank you. Then I will make 2 questions, actually. You show this Gucci new art of... Are those Gucci new style?
I don't know what you're talking about, Jose.
One of the advices I think very inspiring is business model innovation, and innovation is very used word, no?
Yes.
So it's it's like sustainability, you know. Everybody talks about that, and one of the difficulties, and you've been into the panels that we had. In green, it was one of the tools that we are using in Europe for our clients, just to jump from something abstract to something concrete. When you talk about innovation and you have some of the advice, it's just like think about the future. How no, this is one of the steps that you said is like, how something concrete, an example that maybe you can give it to us to understand how to better, you know, like you have. I'm just finishing, but the customers are sending you signals.
Yes.
But how to structure it to give it, you know, like a better vision of what it could happen.
Yes, and I'm happy to speak about this later at length, but one of the exercises that I encourage your companies to do is scenario planning. Now, scenario planning is a system and an exercise where you start to think about the future. We cannot predict the future. If we could, no one would be in this room, okay? We would predict oil prices and we wouldn't need jobs. We wouldn't need businesses. And what we do when we scenario plan is we think about the entire world and we ask ourselves, what are the variables that are going to impact our business based on what we know today? These variables can come from society, from technological advancement, from environmentalism, maybe the economy, potentially the political structure that exists, or our values as human beings. And when we come up with those variables, we rank those variables based on the ones that are uncertain to us. So let's say, I don't know, let's say tariffs, right? Not to get too political, but we have no idea what the US is going to say tomorrow when it comes to tariffs. And tariffs, for us, if we want to be internationally minded, will have an impact on our business. So maybe one of those variables is tariffs. We choose a second variable, and then we map it on a 2x2. And we say, okay, tariffs are either going to have a positive impact or a negative impact. And our second variable will be positive or negative. And what you have here are 4 different scenarios of where the world is going based on the most uncertain variables to your business. With those 4 boxes, you build stories, right? Maybe we're uncertain about technological advancement and we're uncertain about tariffs. So we have a scenario where there is high technological adoption, but also incredibly volatile tariffs. What does that world look like? Once you've decided on what that world is, ask yourself, how can we prepare for that world today? What can we do today so that if that world happens, we're ready to go? Does that mean diversifying our supply chain? Does that mean investing in startups so we can get access to their technology? That's how we start to think about the future in a very pragmatic way. By building scenarios, thinking about the variables that we're uncertain about, mapping them to a 2x2, building stories and asking as a team, how do we deal with that? And what do we do today? Hope that helps.
Very much.
You use a graph of concentric circles in which you put the core, adjacent, and transformational. I got the impression that you consider the adjacent and transformational innovation as more important for the business success.
I do.
Did I get it right?
That's correct.
Could you elaborate a little bit? Why
Absolutely.
not core
Absolutely.
innovation?
So if you remember that, and I don't know if I can bring up the presentation, that might be great, just so I can, 1 second, while I put my shoes back on. When you're targeting existing markets using existing products, we are not delivering value any differently to our customers. We are doing the same exact thing that we're doing today. I brought up one example. Maybe we want to use AI to cross-sell better. Sure, AI is innovative. The problem is that we're still delivering value the same way. We're still generating revenue the same way. And efficiency is not a strategy. Efficiency can only go so far before you have to do something more inventive. Because how efficient can you get? At a certain point, being efficient stops being good for your business. So if you're still going after the same people, using the same kinds of products, that to me is not innovating on your business model. Now, when you start to enter into new markets, and you start to enter into new assets and products, you can see the equation in your head. If I'm entering into new products, that means my customers are growing, and that means if I multiply my customers by the products I sell, by price, I'm generating more revenue. Or if I'm targeting the same customers, but I'm selling new types of products, I'm also generating revenue through that. So in my opinion, efficiency can only go so far. You can try to be as efficient as you want, but it's only going to last a certain period of time. If you start to go into new customers, new markets, or new products, then you start to get into true delivery of value that is different than what you do today, whether it's targeting a new niche or selling a new type of product. So that's why I believe that this area here, it's not innovative because you're still doing the same thing.
The reason for my question is we sell products that are basic. I mean, it's a relatively old industry. We sell on a repeated way. I mean, we have a high cost of acquisition of a new client.
Right.
At the same time, if we don't repeat the sale, it's extenuating. I mean, and sometimes the innovation, more than products, the innovation that we produce as distributors go to the processes that we use or things that we do for our client. Most of the time, the product innovation come from our suppliers. What we innovate is the way we do things for our customers.
Right.
And we learn the hard way that I use this allegory that sales are like climbing to a second floor through an electric escalator that it's coming down.
Okay.
So you have to have more speed than the speed that the escalator is coming down.
Right.
And we hardly measure our business shrug. I mean, we very seldom take a look at that. And in order to grow, sometimes it's better to be effective at not losing customers, because getting new customers is normally very difficult and very costly. So the innovation that we are trying to do right now, and this is something that we're working at, has to do with the existing customers, trying to retain them. We were losing almost 6% of our sales on a quarter basis. We were growing through, overcoming that 6%. But if we were able to stop that 6, make it 3 or make it 2, with less effort, we could be growing at a very accelerated pace. Otherwise, we will need a bigger sales force. So for me, that type of innovation became crucial. And not necessarily, going for adjacent business or for transformational innovation. I don't know if you agree with that.
So here's my honest take, and you may not like my answer. But it sounds like you're trying to find a stopgap. There's an immediate problem. We need to retain our customers because it costs thousands of dollars to bring them in. and we need to ensure that we're doing the basics right. What I'm not advocating for is stopping that. You should continue to do this stuff. It's important. What I am saying is maybe let's dedicate some of that money to building something new or trying something new. And you say that you may have been losing clients or you're losing revenue on a quarterly basis by 6%. Maybe the conversation with the client is figuring out why. Why have you left? What additional services would entice you to stay? What can we build for the future outside of the products we sell to encourage you to stick around? Doing the basics right is good for business, but starting to think about how you can try other things right is good for the future tomorrow. So, yes, do this. Do the core stuff. This is what keeps your business alive, but recognize that that doesn't differentiate you from any other distributor. They're all doing this too. And one day, might be in a position where you're going to be competing on cost. And we know what happens when you compete on cost. It's a tough environment. So maybe it means dedicating 5% of your money to trying things that keep the customer around or encouraging them to buy more from you. Maybe that is process, or maybe that's coming up with certifications or a software as a service platform. I'm making things up, but if you want to continue to live for the future, you'll eventually have to start thinking about new customers and new products. It doesn't mean you're going to make a new sanitation project or a disinfectant, but you can still sell processes to your clients. You can still sell new assets to your clients that help you drive revenue for the future. So I know that was rambling, but keep doing this, but start to think about this stuff because it's important. Because ultimately, everyone you know who you compete with is doing this. And that's not strategic. That's just doing what you've always done. Right? Nokia did the same thing over and over again, doing what they knew, and they don't exist anymore. Not saying your business is going to exist, because it's going to exist forever. But it's important to try new things. And I think when you build the systems, you can start to experiment. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
Thank you.
Fenton, first of all, thank you for your presentation, extremely enlightening. We are a new partner of ALLIA, and my question was in the same line as this one. How can we, how us as manufacturers can see how the traditional business model of distributors is avoiding growth? We are always looking ahead. We are always trying to look and bring innovative products. So you more or less answered where we should focus.
Sure.
And we're trying to focus always on the transformational part, where the distribution is working on the day-to-day basis on the core. So it was very enlightening to have your presentation. Thank you again. And
Thank you.
honored to be here.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are you having conversations with your distributors?
Yeah,
Are you telling them what you think?
and actually asking for feedback also.
Yeah? Are they telling you things?
They do. We learn a lot. Going
Yeah.
out to the field, going out with the distribution is a very enlightening and rich it can help us develop and improve our products.
Good. And are you giving them ideas on how they can improve?
That's exactly where we're trying to.
Yeah. Well,
to
first, I think
reshape.
it starts with a conversation.
Yep.
Right? So tonight you're hopefully going to have a drink with some of your distributors here, and you're going to say, here's how you can be better. But seriously, that's how it starts. It's treating the ecosystem as a partnership and telling them what you think the future is going to look like because you see it, right? You know the customer better than anybody else in the room. Let's give your distributors that insight. And if they're smart, they'll listen to you and they'll write it down. So that's a key to all of you here.
Thank you again.
May I just finish just correcting you today, Fenton?
Pardon?
Can I correct you?
Absolutely.
So, how do you say
Nokia?
Nokia is Nokia in Europe, right? This is first of all. And they have now a revival of this famous Nokia 6020 or whatever. They are coming back. So maybe you choose another example to explain it. Because in a couple of years, you are running out of jokes about Nokia.
To be fair, though, that is a trend. I don't think that's here forever. And we can talk about this later.
We can bet.
We can bet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oi, Felton. Parabéns pela sua apresentação. Ok? Nós falamos aqui hoje de distribuidores, de produtos, de inovação, e nós, não sei, tenho a impressão que esquecemos que as pessoas, eu, você, ele, cada um que está aqui, fazem parte dos negócios. Como que a gente faz com que as pessoas inovem? Porque no final do dia são as pessoas que fazem a empresa.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I get it. Thank you for your question. When we buy from people. We don't buy from companies. When we negotiate, we don't negotiate with AI, we negotiate with people. When we make decisions as human beings, we all think we're logical. Right? We have opposable thumbs. We're at the top of the food chain. We're logical. But studies have shown that when we make decisions, we make them with our emotions. So your question on how we ensure that human beings are thinking innovative, there's a long answer and there's a short answer, and I'll give you the short answer first. Measure their success with innovation. So, let's say you have a team of people. Ensure that one of their key performance indicators is, have you failed this quarter? Have you tried something new this quarter? Have you interacted with new technology? And if they haven't done any of it, hold their bonus back. I know it sounds controversial. But unfortunately, as human beings, we are a reward-based species. We do things based on rewards. Salaries, bonuses, trips, that's how we derive value. So if you want people to care about innovation, incentivize them through their pay structure and their promotions to care. That is the easiest way to start doing it. I promise you, the minute you start to change the incentive structure and you say you have to fail this quarter on something new before you can get a bonus, people will change because we are reward-based. So incentivize your people to try new things. That is the only way that you're going to start to get them to think about innovation. And also, one other thing. Have we ever heard of micromanaging? Who likes a micromanager? Nobody likes a micromanager. Whenever I tell my clients or my audiences, I say, you should be micromanaging, but don't micromanage your people. Micromanage the environment around them. And what that means is building an environment where they're allowed to think differently. Most companies don't give you the chance to think differently. If I think differently, I'm doing something that's against the company values. It's something that is not exciting to the firm. It doesn't add value. So micromanage the environment around them so that they can fail, so that they can try new things, so that they are applauded and rewarded for doing things. And I think that's how you incentivize people, by changing how they're incentivized from a pay structure and ensuring that the environment around them is also conducive to the behaviors that drive innovation, which is attempting, trying. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was awesome. Thank you. I know I am between the smell that can you smell the meat outside and the drinks? Yeah. 5 minutes, I promise, 5 minutes and we are done and we can have a party. But first, I would like to thank some people for this summit. I'm going to do that in Portuguese first. Queria agradecer ao pessoal aqui da COSE, esse espaço maravilhoso que a gente sempre usa. Queria agradecer o suporte de todo mundo aqui. Queria agradecer também o pessoal dos transportes transblindados que ajudaram os nossos convidados e a todo mundo, os transportes entre hotéis, aeroportos e eventos. A Stock ST Traduções, que fizeram um trabalho brilhante, só elogios com relação às traduções de vocês também. Whenever he claps, do it also, okay? A UpDesign, que fizeram os nossos conteúdos. A Black Mind, pela captação e os conteúdos nas redes sociais. A Rita e o Paulo, que estão aí ajudando a gente no foto e filmagem. Obrigado. Um agradecimento muito especial ao Convocar Produções e Eventos, que fizeram essa produção aqui de cair o queixo. Eu nunca vi uma coisa linda desse jeito. O Miguel foi nosso assessor aqui do evento, o anjo da guarda de toda a nossa equipe, está lá fora. Obrigado, Miguel. Claro, agradecer a todo o pessoal do Escritório Central, está todo mundo aqui, todo mundo ajudou a construir esse summit e a fazer esses últimos 3 dias que a gente teve a Assembleia também, esses 3 últimos dias, o sucesso que foi esse summit. Obrigado a todos vocês. I could not finish without thanking a very special person from our central office, Marina. Ela fez todo esse evento, produziu, fez tudo junto. Parabéns. A gente agradece. Desce logo antes que alguém chore aqui, Marina, vai. Antes que alguém chore. Last things that we need to do when we were thinking about ALLIA, on the concept of ALLIA, and we start traveling. Why are you smiling, Jose?
Alan wants to drink.
Okay, sorry. 5 minutes, Alan, 5 minutes.
He said about 10 minutes more.
Very quickly, when we start the first conception of ALLIA, there are 2 people in this room that were very, very important, not just welcoming us, but teaching us the path that we should walk with. And there's 2 people that we need to thank personally. Jose Del Pino and Walt. Please, if you join us here at the stage. If you're flying economics, we have to pay for the luggage. It's fine. Okay?
But he said that he's bigger than mine.
That's an issue between you 2 guys. I have nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. We are very appreciative of all that you have done for us in ALLIA. So we thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Then to end up, swear is the last thing. Swear. To end up, I would like to thank another person, Jaime, because we are next year, he is actually, hosting our next global summit in Mexico. So we would like to thank Jaime to assure that it's going to be a success with you guys in Monterrey. Thank you.
Yesterday we played poker, and you now know who lost. No, seriously, we were considering this next meeting to be in Mexico, and it will be a pleasure to receive the group and try to expand it with other members of this alliance of these 3 big group of distributors that we have put together. We have not decided the dates, and I think it would be wise, to think not only the dates but the program, what we shall do. We have been discussing if what do we need to do between this and the next meeting. Otherwise, we will get to the next meeting and get back to square one. I mean, there are several things that were discussed that I think need to progress, like having a value-added proposition for the customers, doing something on how are we going to build the capabilities to offer that value-added proposition, and many different things that were discussed that we need to recap and set up a plan, a work plan. Another thing, we discuss also if it would be better to have it on a yearly or bi-yearly basis. This is still open to discussion, even though we pretty much think that it's a yearly thing that we need to have. Once those things are defined, we're going to have the dates, and it will be a pleasure to have you all in Mexico. Bye.
With that said, we're ready to party. Please join us outside so we can have some drinks and some food. Obrigado, gente. A gente encontra lá fora na festa. Obrigado.